do it. So Bert, are you?
I'm trying to hear the thunder behind me. Whatever this thunderous news is. I'm not. Anyway, welcome everybody. Hello. Happy Gay Pride. Happy summer solstice. Today, our longest day of the year, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, right? If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it's a little different. So welcome. Maybe this is the thunderous news you're referring to? We're having a barbecue. We're having I say traditional because we've been having it almost every year. It will be this year, it's August Sunday, August 4th, from 6 to 9 in the beginning afternoon, late afternoon, going to the early evening. 6 to 9 at the Frying Pan. That's the pier at 26th Street and the river. And we have reserved the Hudson River end of the pier. That will be all for us. The details, costing, and all of that will follow. But I think I am hearing thunder in the background. So the barbecue, August 4th. I also want to mention that if you're not aware, that we haven't had a dues structure for the last 2 or 3 years. We're resuming dues July 1st. Dues will be $20 per individual. Of course, if you want to pay more than that, certainly accept it. And if you have difficulty making the $20, speak to the treasurer and something I'm sure can be worked out. Okay. And the last thing I want to say is we've been working with one of our people on the executive committee. Molly Harris is working with the Vote Blue. And just for everybody's awareness, they will be getting together and we're going to be endorsing buses in the fall, going into those districts, congressional districts, that if us Democrats get them back, we have the House of Representatives. We're talking about districts, and I have it right in front of me.
16,
Districts
17, and 8.
4, 17, 18, and 19, and New Jersey 7. These are the districts to which we're going to be sending buses. This Vote Blue works with many of the Democratic clubs in Manhattan and some in Brooklyn. So those are my announcements, and let's get on with this exciting agenda.
Bert, before we start, just one more thing. Next Thursday night, we've been invited to join the Four Freedoms Club. They are having a gathering to watch the debate. So it might be fun for all of us to watch it with the other club and each other.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and I will add that it is co-sponsored by the Tilden Democratic Club as well. So we'll be in good company.
I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to make it. I have tickets for Robeson. Now this goes back to my background as a child. Paul Robeson. There's some kind of special event about Paul Robeson at the Little Island. So watch the debate, and I'll find out what happened after. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So turning it to Len Paletta. Len is a member of the executive committee of CRDC, and he is going to be our moderator tonight. Len is a lawyer, and he has a background in labor law. We're very excited about this program, and without further ado, turning it to Len to tell us about this program and the wonderful speakers who are lined up tonight.
Thanks very much, Layla. So tonight we are very fortunate to have 3 of the leading tenant organizers who were deeply involved in the recent statewide effort that led to the successful enactment of a good cause eviction law in our state. It was really a groundbreaking event. Cea Weaver, Renette Bradley, and Charlie Dulick are all experienced, highly skilled, and deeply committed tenant organizers who've doggedly fought to expand tenants' rights for years. Their biographies are listed in tonight's announcement. Briefly, Cea Weaver is the Coalition Director of Housing Justice for All, the statewide organization that headed up the fight for Good Cause Eviction. She has over 10 years of experience as a tenant organizer, a housing policy advocate, and a campaign researcher. As the coalition director, she was deeply involved in the effort for the Good Cause Eviction law. Renette Bradley has been a tenant organizer for years and works with several tenant organizations, including Housing Organizers for People Empowerment, a leading tenant organization in Eastern Brooklyn. She's also a member of the Housing Justice for All, which is Cea Weaver's organization. She's on the Housing Working Group and the State Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America, and works closely with DSA elected leaders Farrah Forrest and Jabari Bridgeport. Charlie Dulick is the Director of Organizing for Housing Conservation Coordinators, a 50-year-old tenants' rights organization on the west side of Manhattan. He's also a writer focusing on housing, tenants' rights, and New York politics, and has published articles in the New Republic, New York Review of Architecture, and the Baffler. Tonight's goal is to educate CRDC members about the recently enacted Good Cause Eviction law, to help us all better understand the law and to learn about the struggle that went into passing the law. We hope to learn about the strengths and the weaknesses of the existing law and ways we can help make it better. We'll begin tonight's conversation, which we have scheduled for approximately 30 minutes, with a brief presentation by Cea Weaver, describing some specifics of the law, and then we'll move into a broader conversation and a broader discussion with Renette, Charlie, and Cea on the law. We'll talk about the identity, size, tactics, and strategy of the coalition that led to the fight and the obstacles they encountered, how they were able to overcome them, and their assessment of the current law and their goals and plans for improvement. Lastly, we'll hear what we can do as the CRDC Club to improve the existing law. We'll then hopefully move to a Q&A session to give members who are here an opportunity to ask questions not covered by the conversation. And we'd like to entertain as many questions as we can. So we'd ask people to keep their questions pointed, short, and to the point, actually. After the Q&A, there'll be some closing remarks. So now let's turn it over to Cea, who is going to start with her presentation.
Were you able to figure out how to give me co-host possibility or share your screen?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen and your presentation will be right here. Can you see it?
Yes, I can. I did make a couple changes since I sent it to you in the Google Doc, but that's okay. I'll do my best and then it's fine. So you can go ahead and, but before you move forward, so I just want to say a little bit about Housing Justice for All. So we are a statewide coalition of about 80 grassroots organizations from Brooklyn to Buffalo, united in our fight for housing as a human right. So there are a wide range of organizations in our coalition, but Good Cause Eviction has been our top priority since 2019, with like a little divergence into the pandemic when we were fighting for an eviction moratorium and emergency rental assistance. But Good Cause has really been the sort of beating heart of HJ4A for many years. And so we are both really happy that it passed and profoundly disappointed by some of the concessions that we had to make in order to win it, which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. Go on to the next slide. You can skip this one and the next one. This is just HJ4A does our meetings in 4 languages. And so typically we start our meetings with with a little presentation about how you can hear the language in the meeting in your language of choice. Just for a little background on us, we have our meetings in Banga, Mandarin, Spanish, and English. So for some background, Good Cause Eviction provides eligible tenants with protections against evictions for no reason. That means that tenants, market rate tenants, have guaranteed lease renewals or the ability to stay in their home month to month without a lease. As we know, there are many tenants across the state who don't have like a written paper lease. They have like informal living arrangement, or maybe their landlord just gave them a month-long lease. Good Cause gives you the right to stay in your home, whether or not you have a lease, and it gives you protections against eviction for no reason. The reasons that your landlord is allowed to evict you is if you haven't been paying your rent, if you're violating some of the terms of your lease, being a nuisance to your neighbors in your building, if the landlord wants to take the apartment for their own their own personal use or their family's personal use. Family is defined pretty extensively, so like your landlord's children and parents, but also nieces and nephews. If the landlord is planning to remove the building from the market or demolish it, or if your landlord is trying to make you sign a renewal lease and you refuse to sign it, and that renewal lease is illegal. Go on to the next slide. Under Good Cause Eviction, your landlord can only increase the rent rate once a year, and you have the ability to challenge rent hikes more than 10% of the consumer price index, known as CPI, or plus 5%, or 10%. Sorry, I messed that up. You can challenge rent hikes that are more than CPI plus 5 or 10%, whichever is lower. That means that there is a cap on rent increases of 10% at all times. In years when CPI is low, it'll be CPI plus 5. Right now, CPI is 3.82%, which means that rent hikes over 8.82% can be challenged. This gives market rate tenants the ability to negotiate with their landlord over rent increases. Your landlord can, of course, raise the rent over this 8.82%, provided that they have good reason, including an increase in costs, taxes, and so on. Next slide. The main concession that we had to make in order to get this bill passed is that they exempted a lot of types of tenants and landlords who we believe should have been covered. So tenants who live in a building that was built before 2009 are covered. Tenants who pay less than 240% of the fair market rent, which is about $6,000 a month for a 1-bedroom, and grows over time, grows like depending on the size of your unit, are covered. If you rent from a landlord who owns more than 10 apartments in New York State total, you are covered. You are not covered if your landlord lives in your building and there are less than 11 apartments in your building. So if you live in an owner-occupied building with 10 apartments or less, you are not covered. If you live and rent in a co-op and condo, you are not covered. If you're renting your home as part of an employment agreement with your employer, you are not covered. And if you rent in manufactured housing, you are not covered. So, you know, these exemptions, I think, are the main thing that made us feel like this bill was not what we wanted. We wanted a universal right, which would allow all tenants to negotiate over the terms of their lease. Next slide. So the other thing is that renters outside of New York City were exempt. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this with this crew because we're all in Chelsea, but the reality is that there's a rental crisis all over New York State, and we were really gutted to learn that our friends and comrades in upstate New York weren't going to be able to be covered by this bill. They do have the ability to opt in, which means that people in Rochester, Albany, Syracuse, the Hudson Valley, all of those towns and municipalities are launching campaigns right now to bring good cause to their communities. We think that that's an unnecessary step and that the state should have just given them their rights at the same time as they gave it to people in New York City. Next slide. So Good Cause is in effect right now, and Charlie can tell you more about this because he's been talking to a lot of tenants who are hearing from landlords who are lying to them about their rights. But starting in August 2024, all landlords have to tell tenants on their lease, this is a good cause apartment, this is not a good cause apartment. Right now, landlords have like this grace period where they can develop those notices, and they're going to get guidance from the state on what the notices are supposed to look like. but your landlord must notify you at 3 points of time whether or not you have good cause. They happen starting in August 2024, when you sign or renew your lease, when they try to raise your rent, and if they start eviction proceedings against you. So they have to notify you. And if your landlord does not notify you, if you don't get a notice about good cause from your landlord, the assumption and the presumption that the court is supposed to make is that you're covered. Right now, we're in this period right after the law passed where notice requirements are not yet in effect, but the law is in effect. So if you are a renter and you're wondering if you have good cause, please reach out to info@Housing Justice for All, and we'll help you figure out if you're covered. We'll connect you to a local tenant organizer. Because of course you don't have to rely on your landlord to know if you're covered. Let's go to the next slide. We can use good cause to negotiate with our landlords. Talking to your neighbors is a great way to understand if you're covered. You can go to openigloo.com, and I'll put that in the chat, and you can put in your address and it will tell you if you are covered. Oh, there is no chat. I forgot there is no chat. I'll send that for the email follow-up. You can go to openigloo.com, put in your address, and it will tell you whether or not you're covered by good cause. But the best thing that you can do to ensure your good cause coverage is to get organized with your neighbors and to use a tenants association to negotiate with your landlord for better lease renewal terms and lower rent increases and more repairs. Next slide. I already talked about this, but there is sample language on HCFRA's website about a letter that you could send to your landlord demanding a fair lease in accordance with the language of good cause eviction. Next slide. One of the main reasons we fought for good cause is that when tenants called through and went for repairs, they would get a retaliatory eviction. We are hoping that many tenants who used to be afraid to join their tenant association that was fighting for repairs will be able to join now and be able to fight with their rent stabilized neighbors and their subsidized neighbors for fair housing rights. Next slide. And then, of course, you know, we don't want good cause to be only a defense in court. We want it to be the right to organize. We want it to be the right to negotiate with your landlord. But good cause ultimately is a defense in court. There are hundreds of thousands really of housing court attorneys all over New York City, thanks to Right to Counsel. And these Right to Counsel attorneys will be able to protect New Yorkers who are facing eviction and use the good cause rights to defend 1.3 million households who now have the right to renew their lease who didn't have it before. Good cause eviction is the biggest expansion of tenants' rights in more than 50 years. We're bringing the right to renew your lease to, again, 1.3 million people. This is a huge deal. It's going to transform our housing movement. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, we have to use our good cause rights to organize. The reason we did this is because we believe that every New Yorker should have a safe, stable, and affordable home. Good cause is just the step into the future. We're going to talk more about this in the rest of the panel. This is the part that I edited that I didn't get the part to put into the slides, but I just want to share 3 lessons that I think will be jumping off points for the conversation with Renette and Charlie, and I'll just say them out loud. The first is that as Housing Justice for All, we have a bunch of support in the legislature. I want to say that Brad Hoylman-Siegel and Tony Simone were particularly supportive members of the Campaign for Good Cause, as was Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal, who is the housing chair, and Senator Brian Kavanaugh, who's also the housing chair. I know Linda and Brian aren't quite in your area; they're like just outside. But both of them have been very supportive of the fight for good cause for a long time, and we expect will continue to fight with us, as well as Tony Simone and Brad Hoylman-Siegel, who are true, I think, allies in the fight for housing justice. So good work, but there's more for them to do. Because we have a lot of support in the legislature, maybe in Manhattan and in some parts of Brooklyn, but we don't have enough to win a clean victory without compromise. So that leads me to my next point, and Charlie wrote about this in the Baffler in a great article that if you haven't read, you should read. But the real estate industry is using their money to build legitimate grassroots opposition to good cause. This is not simply like a fight of like the real estate money. The real estate are like big corporate power players, and then there's the little guys who are the tenants. Like the real estate industry was able to stand up grassroots organizations of working class people who are afraid of the tenant movement, and they supercharged that with money, but it was real. There is like there's a real opposition in working class communities to tenants' rights that is being supercharged by revenues money, and that is something that we have to find a way to combat it. And the only way that we can combat it as a tenant movement is to build our base. And we are going to build our base through positive campaigns for not just defensive tenants' rights, like Good Cause, but transformative things like social housing. I know Penn South is in your area. We're really inspired by the legacy of Penn South. We'd like to see that type of housing expanded across the state. And so that's, I think, the future of the housing movement, both like learning from the failures and the successes of that model of cooperative living, of social housing, and of course, strong tenants' rights for everyone. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Cea. So, can we move into more of a conversation with Charlie and Renette? How can we start our conversation with that? Renette, do you want to?
You're ready to go. Jump right in.
Yeah. Renette? You're on mute.
Hi, I'm sorry. My name.
Renette, you put yourself on mute again.
Can't do this right now. Hello?
Yep.
Hold on. Let me get my food first.
Oh, my
Let me
bad.
get.
My bad.
Hold on. Give me a second. I'm so sorry. I'm at my tenant meeting with the organization. So I'm sorry. So I'm here to talk about Good Cause. My name is Renette Bradley. I'm a member of the Hope Tenant Union, which hope we are tenant empowerment. I fought long and hard for the Good Cause eviction. It wasn't.
Oops. You're back on mute, Renette.
I'm sorry, I'm outside in the park and I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. I believe that I fought for Good Cause because I needed tenant protections. And I needed for my landlord to be held accountable. And he wasn't being held accountable. Take that over there, Donna, please. He wasn't being held accountable. It was like, he didn't want to renew my lease. And he was supposed to renew my lease. But now that we have the Good Cause tenant protections, which is really not what we wanted, but we can build on it. I'm gonna pass it to Charlie so I can get my thoughts together. I'm sorry.
Charlie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, totally. Happy to be here. So, I mean, I've been in this fight for good cause specifically pretty much since the start. I actually, before I was here on the West Side, was organizing with Renette in Brooklyn, and I've been going to Housing Justice for All meetings since basically it soon after it was founded in 2018. So, you know, it's been a long time coming to get this passed, and I think Cea's summary of the political dynamics are right. You know, we didn't get everything we wanted, despite, you know, here on the West Side having some great support. And really, what I've been working on pretty much nonstop since this passed on, I believe, April 20th, has been the implementation. And like Cea alluded to earlier, there have been seemingly infinite permutations of ways that landlords have tried to evade it and carve themselves out and say this doesn't apply to me, or every which get out of it in every which way. So we've been doing a lot. We've been trying. We have had a few webinars of our own to let tenants know. Definitely getting a lot of folks walking into our office or reaching out with questions. And then, you know, most impactfully, like Cea said, we've been trying to do some real organizing in buildings with tenants who now are covered in ways they previously were not. You can point to one portfolio we've been organizing in It's the Tran family. They have about 15 buildings across the city. They're on the worst landlords list. And we've been organizing a mix of rent stabilized and market rate tenants. And a lot of the market rate tenants were really hesitant to get involved. We're hesitant to sign on to, or to be a part of legal action, to talk to press, to maybe go on a rent strike, and then got involved in the campaign for Good Cause, won it, and now many of them who are not offered lease renewals are going to be able to stay. So really emphasizing that, you know, we again, we didn't get everything we wanted, but there has been tangible progress in a really impressive way. I
Turn
think
that down a little.
you know, even in 2019
Can you turn that down just a little?
when the HSTPA passed, when there was all these amazing, huge reforms to and closing of loopholes with rent stabilization, that was still reforming a system in an incredibly important, serious way. But you know, Good Cause is the first time we've really expanded new protections to many new tenants, and that's incredibly exciting. And I think something that will lead to more wins down the road and expansion of the tenant movement, but only if we're really laser focused on building it. So yeah, I definitely have a lot to say on that front, but I'll stop here.
Renette, you're on mute again.
Yes, I'm sorry. I got my mind together. I represent a lot of tenants also under landlords that was on the worst landlord list. And we had to fight, and where the landlords was like doing sneaky stuff. They was harassing the tenants. They was telling tenants they had to move out because they wanted to move their family members in, or they had a friend waiting for the apartment. And Good Cause changed that. Where Good Cause made it where it stops the eviction machine just a little bit. It keeps the person in their apartment, and it makes the landlord accountable. Where they wasn't being held accountable. Now the landlord didn't have to meet and talk with us, but now they have to meet and talk with us. Now they have to tell the truth. They can't say, well, like me, I'm a Section 8 tenant, but I'm also covered under Good Cause. So my landlord was trying to pull some kind of sneaky stuff where I had a washing machine and my cat, and she let me move in with that, and I was there for 3 years. And she tried to put me out. But
Wow.
once Good Cause came into effect, she found that she couldn't do that. Because that's not a good reason to put a person out.
To say a little bit more about like what Renette is describing is like one of the reasons we really fought for Good Cause is that there are many, many, many New Yorkers in the city who pay their rent with their rental assistance voucher, including Renette. And so they have, you know, public subsidies to, you know, make sure that they can afford their rent every month. What would happen when a landlord would sell the building is they would just say, okay, everybody has to get out. The building's being sold, and Section 8 tenants would have to leave, or city stops tenants would have to leave, and all these people would have to leave because the landlord didn't have to give a reason for why people had to go. So the situation that I'm describing and Renette is describing is clear source of income discrimination. But before Good Cause, there was no way for tenants to enforce that, right? Because the landlord didn't have to give a reason to evict you. The landlord could just say, Renette, you gotta go, right? Now, because people have the right to renew their lease and the right to stay, the landlord would have to give a reason. And landlords are not allowed to say in court, I'm evicting Renette because she has Section 8 and I don't like dealing with Section 8. So there's a lot more protections for people who pay their rent with any sort of income, right? Those protections that New Yorkers already had, protections from source of income discrimination, now can be enforced because tenants have the right to organize under Good Cause eviction.
Yeah,
I do want to. Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, I just. Oh, sorry, Leno.
No, go ahead, Charlie. I was going to ask that you talked about the fact that there are 80 organizations that are part of the coalition, and clearly the whole issue of implementation is very important in terms of getting the notice out. So can you kind of tell us what steps have you taken, or what steps are being taken, or do you anticipate being taken to help to get the word out to the millions of tenants, the 1.3 million tenants you say who are now covered for the first time for good cause eviction? It's a huge, huge endeavor, right?
Well, we're
Charlie?
holding workshops. We're holding workshops. We have a WhatsApp group that's teaching and training. Each coalition has somebody that's teaching them know your rights. So if you know in your rights, as part of me teaching you knowing your rights, I teach you your rights about good cause and we tell you who's covered and who's ain't covered. And that's what we're doing right now. Right now we have like 80 grassroots organizations under Housing Justice for All. So it's like every week we have a different meeting. We're teaching within our coalition how this works. We teaching our tenants when we have our TA meeting. That's what we're doing in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Now,
you
Charlie.
know, thanks for that. Yeah, I think similarly, it's all hands on deck, really trying to just push the news as much as possible. I mean, we have had a huge uptick of people just calling us and walking in saying, I heard about this little bit. Obviously, that doesn't reach everyone. That doesn't even reach close to it. We had a series of webinars, our general meeting, which is once a month. We did a training on it and got more people than I've seen in a general meeting in over a year of working here. Then we had webinars in the 2 subsequent weeks, and also had a huge turnout for those. So really going to keep doing that. Like Renette said, keep bringing it up at any active tenants association meetings, any portfolios we're working in. Obviously, social media. We've been tabling at events like the 9th Avenue Food Festival we were at. Reaching out to organizations and really trying to target some more outreach this summer to buildings that we know would be covered. So buildings that are under the unit count or otherwise might it might be relevant to, which actually segues into what I was going to follow Cea with. Another program that Good Cause, a pre-existing and very widespread housing program in New York State that Good Cause works well with or really supports is 421A. Which is a huge on the west side. There's so many buildings and so many massive buildings with hundreds and even across the entire west side, thousands of tenants who are in 421A buildings. Obviously, there's some affordable tenants whose rent stabilization will remain even once the building exits the tax abatement program. But the vast majority, like 80% of these, I think I saw in the next 2 years, there's something like 5,000 apartments that would be leaving 421A and leaving rent stabilization just on the west side alone. A huge number. Those tenants, when the program expires, at their next lease renewal, they are fully market rate, and in many cases, landlords say, I can not offer this person a renewal, or I can really go gangbusters and go crazy. A lot of those tenants, I just came actually from 6 to 7, was at a webinar for 421A, and a ton of the questions were, does Good Cause now protect me? And those tenants who were previously exiting rent stabilization and had a form of security and then had no protection now are kind of, obviously Good Cause is not quite as strong, but now have a real a real type of protection in place to keep them in their homes that maybe some of them have lived in for 20 or more years. So that's another kind of targeted type of outreach we're trying to doing, but it really is just going to be we talked about it with Westna, the West Side Neighborhood Alliance, the grassroots community group that we support that's been around for about 20 years. Just this is going to be the summer of pounding pavement and letting as many people as know possible. And it seems like, from what I can tell, the groups all over New York are doing the same thing. I know groups upstate are opting in and leading those campaigns, but I think it's just pedal to the metal and letting as many people know as possible.
Is there a Know Your Rights pamphlet or a Know Your Rights?
Yes, I can send one
document?
around. I think Cea and I probably have different variations of the same one.
Use Charlie's. Charlie's is fine.
Well, and mine
One
has
thing
my
I do
contact
wanna-
info on it, which is good.
Yeah, use Charlie's, which is better. One thing that I did want to flag is that, like, you know, as these things go, I don't know, for folks who are like familiar with like how Albany works, it's like sort of like they do a lot of like very consequential decisions over a period of like 48 to like 48 hours. Like, I don't know, they like crunch a lot of decisions into like a hell week of like, you know, 20-hour work
Yeah, I
days,
need a
basically.
burger and some potato salad, but I'm waiting.
just gonna
till I finish this.
I'm gonna mute you, Renette. Can someone mute Renette? So the bill was written like pretty quickly, which is normal in the way that Albany does things. They don't have to; they choose to do that way for the a different type of conversation. But there's a lot of open questions about how the bill can be enforced because there's a lot of stuff in it that's like not the way that like a lawyer would have written it, someone who practices in housing court would have written it. And so one of the questions is exactly to Charlie's point. Like, the landlords are arguing that when a building is expiring from a regulatory agreement, they aren't covered. We are arguing that, of course, they are covered. And the bill is a little bit ambiguous. And so that's like one of the things that we're going to find out what happens in court, but we are going to like vociferously and like very, very like with both like the might of our lawyers, the might of our tenant organizing, the might of the press that we are able to wield, like demand that tenants get covered by good cause as their buildings are leaving regulatory agreements, despite the fact that like the real estate industry is determined to sue and say that those tenants don't get protections. And so we're just gonna see what the court say. But yeah, stay tuned.
Right. And the Right to Counsel Coalition, are you working with them? Is that part of your overall coalition?
Of course, yeah. So, you know, we could do Russian nesting dolls, coalitions and coalitions and coalitions and coalitions. Right to Counsel is a very strong ally of ours. Many of H348's members are also members of Right to Counsel. We know, including HCC, including that council, including HOPE, we know that we cannot enforce this bill without a strong investment in tenant rights enforcement through the court system, through Right to Counsel. We were really disappointed that the state did not decide to fund an expansion of statewide Right to Counsel because honestly, like, we have it good in New York City, in upstate New York, you know, like this portfolio exemption that they drafted is so confusing and guts the bill in upstate New York. So even when Kingston opts in, they don't have open igloo in Kingston. They don't have a trove of open data on the New York City government website matching portfolio owners with like landlords and building addresses. So in Kingston, in Albany, in Rochester, the state has crafted a bill that will not work for those places because tenants have no way and there's no public information to know if someone is covered. And that happened because the real estate industry just like railed about quote unquote small landlords for 3 years, right? Like that's like real. So that means that without a lawyer in Albany who is going to defend a tenant and do discovery to find out if this person is actually covered or not, this bill will be very hard to enforce. Which means like we need the next step here to be a big expansion of statewide Right to Counsel. Because in New York City, we're going to do our best through tenant organizing. We are going to do our best through tenant organizing in upstate New York as well. But in upstate New York, it will be harder. We are really blessed by the amount of open data that New York City has, and most places don't have that.
All right, and one last question. You mentioned opposition of working class. There's working class people. How is that? Can you kind of go into that a little bit so we get a sense of what the line of demarcation is there? And how do you
Charlie, I think you should take
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, I would maybe cool with that a lot of landlords are working class, but just definitionally, if that's where your income is coming from, you probably have a different relationship to to class-based issues. But I think in general, I would maybe use some different phrases, but like smaller landlords, to whatever extent that's a real phrase, landlords who often are people of color, and landlords who aren't the inheriting 50 buildings from dynastic family wealth. They're not the Dursts, they're not the Trumps. So I think they're able to portray themselves as more working class in a way that is I would say not accurate. But yeah, I think there are groups that have been extremely strongly built up over the last 5 years or so. I think the other time when we saw a huge explosion of landlord organizing was back in the late 60s and early 70s, when rent stabilization and rent control were kind of going back and forth. It was kind of a legislative regulatory jump ball, and it was controlled by Mayor Lindsay, and then it was taken back by the state, and there was all this up in the air. And there was a real moment where landlords thought, hey, we have some precarity right now, like this regulations could be increased and could be bad for us, and we also have a moment of opportunity to really water stuff down. And that's Rebney around that time hired professional staff. They had previously been all volunteer. They made their presidency a paid position. There also started to be the founding of groups like SPONY, Small Property Owners of New York, and CHIP, which is now combined with the Rent Stabilization Association, the RSA, into a new org. I can't remember their name. And I think we saw, basically, they then watered down all the loopholes that we closed, or many of them that we closed in 2019. They spent the next, with that increase of organization, spend the next few decades watering down rent stabilization. I think in 2019, when we passed huge rent reforms in the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, and we closed a lot of those loopholes. And then immediately after, when for a moment in the pandemic, before before there were rental assistance programs, but as there was an eviction moratorium, there was a real moment where landlords freaked out. I mean, like, all the stories of New York it's going back to the bad old days. It's going back to the 70s. Tenants are squatting, no one's paying, they can't get evicted. Where landlords, the combination of those two things, freaked out and felt that vulnerability, and really got organized. And I think one of the things they did is they said, hey, how did we lose in 2019? Oh, it was this huge grassroots movement that, Housing Justice for All had been founded, the previous year or 2 years prior, and really connected tenants from around the state. And we're doing in-person lobbying, and we're doing lots of social media stuff. And I think they successfully mirrored a lot of those tactics and have been mobilizing mobilizing landlords, smaller landlords to Albany, have been doing certainly a huge and sophisticated social media campaign. And you know what? Like, there are ways where it's easier to organize when you're a landlord. It's easier, like if Cea had $50 million like Rebney had to drop on lawsuits and mailers and everything, I think her job would be a whole lot easier, and mine too. So they, like Cea said, it's kind of this hybrid where there is a groundswell of landlords who weren't covered by rent stabilization, who were very scared of good cause eviction. And there's big money landlords coming in and saying it's also in our benefit to prop those groups up, and it really benefits both of us together. So, I think my final thing is I would reject kind of the division of small and big landlords. They really work seamlessly together and have, as long as the landlord lobby has existed in New York. And so really, it's, I think when we look at opposition, though, and I'm sure there will be opposition to water down good cause and roll back rent stabilization in other ways. And I think that, whichever mouth it's coming from, whether it's from Jim Whelan, the president of Rebney, or some new small landlord group you've never heard of that got founded yesterday, it's the part of the same team, and they're working together, and it really behooves us to be as organized and as connected.
What's the role of labor unions in New York? New York's a strong labor state. Where are they on this fight?
I mean, that's a really good question. It really depends on the union. I would say like our biggest supporter as HJ4A forever has been FEIU 1199 or 1199 FEIU. Actually, they like to be called 1199 FEIU, which is a long story I've never heard, but they keep promising to tell me. So they've been a big supporters of tenants' rights for a long time. You know, I think the other unions is more of a mixed bag. The trades really supported Good Cause. I think more sort of like functionally to build leverage for some of their other fights. 32BJ has a lobbying alignment with the real estate industry. And I'm not saying that pejoratively. It's like in their contract, it is just part of the deal. It's part of their political assessment, and they're not in some analysis, like they're not wrong, right? Like they believe that they do well when the industry does well. And so they agree in their contract to lobby with the industry in Albany. That means that as the real estate industry has become toxic, 32BJ has become the friendly face of the industry. So for example, the industry was lobbying in the Senate and the legislature, the Senate and the Assembly, and the governor, of course. But often they were having 32BJ as their mouthpiece. So we would hear things from lawmakers that were like, oh, we met with 32BJ. They said that this is the position of Good Cause that they would support. And we would be like, yeah, that's Rebney's version of Good Cause. And the legislature would say, oh, but no, it's coming to us from a union. Unions are the workers, like we support us. And so that was like that was just like a reality that we had to navigate this year, is that BJ built a pro-development and pro-tenant protection coalition of labor unions that was carrying the industry's line on what version of Good Cause would be okay. We could have a conversation for, you know, like an entire month or 2 months or 5 months or a year of like learnings that the tenant movement and the labor movement have of how to work together. And again, like I'm not mad at BJ for making the calculations they made, but I will say like we have a lot of work to do to make sure that the labor movement made up of working class people is standing on the side of the other working class people who rent, and not the industry that is building the housing.
Right. So maybe we can move to a question of what we can do, what the CRDC can do to help improve the chances of strengthening the good cause eviction, and then maybe we can entertain a few questions at the end. But what are your, going forward, where do you think we can help, or what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I could say certainly on the West Side, being plugged in with HCC and the West Side Neighborhood Alliance, and you know, but just letting folks know that we're here and we're organizing around this and here to provide support. You know, would love to reach back out to you all again next year when we're going into the legislative session about coordinating our message and what we're going to, you know, Brad Hoylman and Tony Simone with, and making sure we're on the same page there. You know, I think a major challenge, and we met with Brad's staff last week and are meeting with Tony next week, and you know, they showed up to all of our rallies, and we're really you know, really connected to us throughout the fight. And they just said, hey, it's also, you know, it's not areas like the West Side that are really being quite the issue here, that are you know, against bills like Good Cause Eviction or whatever the next expansion is that we're fighting for next year. So, you know, maybe leave it to Cea for a little bit about that broader analysis, but I certainly think that the more pressure, or in this case, the more support we can show to our electeds, that this really is our top issue, that, you know, they can't, you know, we appreciate they're fighting for us, but they can't walk away from Albany without fighting for this. Is, you know, the more the better.
I mean, you know, it's a few days before election day, as you guys were chatting about. If you really want to help, I know that you probably don't endorse candidates out of your, I know you definitely don't endorse candidates out of your club. But you know, as personal people who are here, if you want to like get out the vote for candidates who are true good cause supporters, there are a lot of them on the ballot right now, both people who are challenging incumbents who were opposed to good cause, like Ian Huntley is challenging Stephanie Dienerman. She was a huge problem for us. If you're bored on election day and you have off of work and you want to come to Bed-Stuy and knock on some doors, we will love to have you. If you want to stay in your house and call, you're happy to do that too.
Just to jump in for 1 second to underline this, Renette and I met maybe 2 or 3
Not
years ago
only-
with Stephanie Zinnerman multiple times about good cause. And the things that she told us were some of the most ludicrous, ridiculous things I've ever heard out of the mouth of any elected official.
Who was that?
If good, when we met with Zinnerman, you remember up in Albany, and she said
Stephanie Dienerman.
and she said that if good cause passes, it's going to lead to mass homelessness of all of the grandmas that are landlords who, if they can't jack up the rent an infinite amount, they will become homeless, and it's not fair to them. And when Renette said, aren't there way more grandmas that are tenants? She just moved on and didn't respond to that. I mean, well, Renette, we had a rally at her house. I mean, she was the more of an opponent of good cause eviction than I would have ever expected from someone whose district is what, 75, 78, 80%.
70% renter.
Yeah, it was absurd.
And it's my mission to get rid of Stephanie. I told her that if she didn't vote for good cause and she didn't stick with the tenant, that I will vote her out. So it's my mission to get as many people to vote her out, because we don't need people that's not going to stand up with us. We don't need to be putting these people in office and these people just taking money from industry. We need housing and we need tenant protection.
So if you want to come help us get out the vote in Bed-Stuy, literally this election is going to be decided by like 12 voters. We really encourage you to come out and help us on election day. You can do it from your home or you can do it here. Reach out to me, reach out to Charlie, reach out to Renette, we'll connect you. If you want something closer to home in Manhattan, your state, not your state senator, but the next district over, Kristen Gonzalez, is being challenged by a landlord with a sorry for sharing, a ton of revenue money, in part because of her support for good cause. So if you want to get out the vote in Skytown, if you want to support Kristen on election day, really encourage you to do that. She's an amazing state senator who stood up for tenant protections in her 2 years in office, and the industry is backing a primary challenger to her. And we'd love to make sure that she wins re-election so that she can keep doing the people's work up in Albany. I'm confident that she will win. She's people love her, but we could always use more reinforcements. So pick your poison. You can help us like punch up against the shitty incumbent, or you can help us defend a tenant champion, but we really need the support. Tenants really need the support this election day.
Great. And you mentioned that there are some good cause supporters, really good cause supporters. Do you have names, or you could maybe give us some names of some of those good cause supporters, or
the good cause supporters who are facing primary challenges from the right on account of their support for good cause are Kristen, who I already said, Emily Gallagher, who represents Greenpoint and Lanesburg in Brooklyn, Johanna Sesta, who represents the Hudson Valley, and sure there's definitely more that I can't come up. You know, there are people who have supported good cause with consequences, and we need to back them up.
Good. Well, maybe you could send those on to us at some point. That would be great. All right.
Yeah, those are the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other comments that you want to make, Renette or Charlie or Cea, before we just entertain a few questions? We're running, it's about 8 o'clock. And we have a couple of people who've had their hands up for quite a while. They have questions I'm sure they want to ask. But if there are any other comments that you want to make before we ask those folks what their questions are?
Yeah, I just have a super quick plug. Wesna, we have monthly meetings going over, all sorts of relevant housing issues for tenants on the West Side, both practical kind of things that organizing your building, but also talking about kind of the political state of play and what we can do here. Our next one is a week from tonight, next Thursday night, and it's up at the Goddard Riverside Community Center. Len, if you could just send around my contact information to anyone who wants to either come to that or just get involved with Wesna in the future, should shoot me an email, give me a call. No bad way to reach out.
Great, will do.
Say that,
Okay.
we hold, at Hope, we hold our Know Your Rights meetings every Thursday, every other Thursday of the month. But right now, we're getting ready to do our summer series, and you can come out and learn about Good Cause. We're very good at that. We'll teach you your rights, and you're welcome to come. We meet in Lincoln Park on the Saturdays, and I could put in the chat our event agenda.
That's in Brooklyn, right, Renette?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are Hope. I'm gonna put my flyer and my information in the agenda, and y'all can contact us.
Great. Okay. All right, Cea? Okay, you're good. So we have two questions I can see. One from Rosemary Garcia. Rosemary, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
How you doing? My daughter lives in Mitchell Lama Houses. Her name, she never changed it to her marriage name. She's been paying rent there for 18 years, renewing the lease under her birth name. But they have on the deed the wrong name. Therefore, Section 8 just approved her on Monday. She won't be able to get Section 8. How could she help? She went to the management. She went above the management. She went to the politicians. She's on an ongoing divorce that hasn't happened yet. And if she don't get the name on the deed changed, her Section 8 will not be able to do the paperwork. She's a working person. She has a 15-year-old daughter, and she's 46 years old.
I'm not sure we can answer that question.
Yeah, if you want to send me an email tomorrow, I can talk to our legal team and get some advice to pass along to her.
Okay, can you send me your email to my email address?
Sure, with that, yeah, if that works.
So maybe what we can, Rosemary, maybe what we can do is that we can get in touch with you. I think that we should be able to have your email address.
Yeah,
and
you
then,
do.
I want to make sure, because these are going to live forever on our YouTube channel. I don't want to disclose any personal information.
Thank you.
But we can put you in touch with Charlie.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Please, she needs the help right away before the whole Section 8 goes out the window.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Diana?
I wondered how this would impact on NYCHA housing and all the other public housing that they're trying to convert, and really it will wind up evicting people who are going to be having to home.
NYCHA tenants already have good cause protections. The vast majority of low income and working class people in New York State live in the private housing market. That doesn't mean that NYCHA is not under attack. It is. And one of the reasons it's under attack is because the gap between what landlords can get in the private market and what they can get in public housing is vast. And so that means the NYCHA land is targeted for development because rent hikes are so high in the private market. By limiting rent hikes in the private market and cooling that speculation a little bit, we are doing a little bit to protect NYCHA, sort of structurally, and helping NYCHA residents. It's not directly helping NYCHA residents because NYCHA residents already have some of the strongest good cause protections in the United States, truly. But we are like we're giving solidarity, and we're limiting the speculative value of the real estate in general, which does limit the sort of pressure to privatize and demolish.
How does good cause relate to racism?
For the vast majority of people, or Black people are much more likely to rent than their white counterparts. And so that means that good cause and 1 in 5 Black women are facing eviction in their lifetime. And in New York State, Black women face eviction at much higher rates than white families in the private housing market. So good cause will protect people who are facing eviction, especially people who are Black, people who are people of color, renters who are people of color. Renters are more likely to be people of color. Evictions are 3 times more likely. Excuse me?
And what about LGBTQ?
I don't have those stats right in front of me, right? But good cause is a universal right for all people, and the reality is that that people of color and queer people are facing a lot more housing discrimination in the market, and good cause is a tool for all people to fight housing discrimination, including housing discrimination that happens through eviction.
Yeah. All right. And I think we're gonna, John, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Cea. Good to see you guys, Charlie and all you. The 421A you were talking about is going away for a lot of people, and that's scary. We have enough of a problem. Was that the intention? You told me about the lawsuit that might come of that. What was the intention behind it? You said it'd be a chance to test the law, and I'm all for the fight.
The intention of good cause is to protect everybody. Unfortunately, the state legislature and the governor put these loopholes in it, and we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just on a 421A webinar before this and had tenants who were in this position, and they said, so am I covered? And I said, well, maybe if you all fight for it together, and HCC will help you, and Wesner will help you, and our legal staff will help you. But it's ultimately a really not fair position to put tenants in, to pass a law and just leave these huge question marks that to maybe be covered by the law, you have to opt into taking this risk and being a part of a legal battle. It's a really disappointing position to have put, again, thousands of tenants just in our area, and then tens of thousands across the rest of the state in, which is unfortunate. But I am confident we will find some tenants to take that risk, and that we will fight, and I believe that we're going to win.
Cool.
And I cannot be more clear. This
actually
was
have
not the intention. We introduced a bill that was a near universal right for everybody. Like, we were committed to that bill. We condemned the housing budget when it was passed. Like, people are fucking pissed at us because we condemned it. Like, this is not the version of good cause we wanted. That doesn't mean we're not going to use it to do the best that we can to protect as many people as possible. But no, it's not our intention to carve people out. That's not.
Oh, I wasn't. I
Who we
didn't
are.
even think that. Yeah, didn't occur.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. It's actually super interesting. I did not realize that this aspect of the consequence of the new law. But as you pointed, there are actually a pretty large number of units in our district that are under 421A, and they are reverting back to quote unquote market rate. So it's going to be very important for us, and I think we can play a role there to actually monitor what's happening, and maybe do some outreach proactively, because as Cea was saying, there's a lot of this information that is public information, and if we are organized well enough, we can actually do some outreach before the units revert back to market rate, to make the tenants aware. And just so that I understand, that would mean that someone who would be in a unit that is under 421A at let's say 60% of the AMI, it means that when it reverts to market rate, the landlord would be able to increase the rent by 10% or the index price plus 5%, correct? So it wouldn't be moving to 100% market rate, and then this is where the new base becomes. Is that your understanding of the law?
Like I said, the law is pretty sloppy and we don't really know yet how it's going to happen. And I think it would be best to reach out to a lawyer for a one-on-one conversation. And over the months to come, we will learn more.
Got it.
But I think the idea of inoculating people by informing them of the law and their rights is clearly right on point for us. Yeah, that would be great. Okay, I think, Rosemary, you have your hand up. Is that, you have another question or? Are you
Yes,
just,
I do. This
okay,
question,
quick, let's make it quick because.
I got a letter that said NYCHA has something about the hot water and stuff that they were gonna give credit back to their tenants. It's a legal action they're taking. Can you please explain what that really means?
Unfortunately, I can't. This is, it's unrelated to the topic of tonight's discussion.
I'm sorry.
Thank
yeah.
you. It's okay. I do encourage you to reach out to Legal Aid Society, which is providing a lot of technical support for the folks who are going through what's happening at Brooklyn and Chelsea, and they will provide one-on-one legal advice to anyone who lives there about the current situation, and they are fighting with you to stop what's going on.
Thank you so much, all of you.
Okay.
So folks who are attending this event, if you have another question for any of our speakers, now is the time to use the raise hand function and ask your question. Okay, I think we have addressed all of them, Len.
Yes, okay, well, thank you very much, Cea, Charlie, and Renette. Thank you for making a wonderful presentation and a discussion and giving us a clearer understanding of what the law is and also where the weaknesses are and the work that needs to be done to implement it and to make sure that the tenants in New York City know about the law, but also extending the law's reach statewide and doing whatever we can to help spread the word and make it effective for all the tenants in the state of New York. Thank you very much. I think it's been a very good conversation. I know I've learned quite a bit about it, and I'm sure everyone else here is very thankful that you took the time to make your presentations and give us the full experience or the full story really on your experience. And there's a lot more that can be said, I'm sure.
And I just want to thank you for pulling this great panel together.
Well, Layla really was also very instrumental in helping pull it together, but it was great. It was great. We're very glad that everybody came, and thank you for the time, Charlie, Renette, and Cea. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Hope to stay in touch into the future.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And
Thank you all.
we'll do some cabling and spread the word. We'll do some mass, if you folks put together a Know Your Rights leaflet or
I emailed you one in the middle of this meeting.
Great. Thank
That
you.
would be
Charlie.
very helpful. Yeah, great.
Yeah, we'll mass produce it and get it out to our folks.
Awesome. Have a great night, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much. As I said, this is going to continue to exist on CRDC's YouTube channel, so the information will be available. We will share some of this information in our next e-blast. Charlie, I will be in touch with you so that we can mention actually the monthly meetings that you organize. We will mention emails and websites where people can find some resources. We will, of course, link to the YouTube replay. And it's really wonderful to be able to do these educational programs. So much gratitude to echo what Len and Roberta said. Thank you all so much. Wishing you a wonderful summer. And we will see you in September. We will resume our program in September. Before that, we will see you at the CRDC barbecue August 4th. There will be more on the email that we will be sending very soon. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Yeah, have a great night. Thanks a lot for everything.